They say a man changes in war, that you come back with your eyes older than your face, that your hands shake even when you're calm, that your memories don't wait for sleep to haunt you. But Ray Carter, he came back with something heavier than all that. He came back expecting to matter. This is Injustice Browning. I'm Mark Joie. If this story moves you even a little, hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment till we tell the stories that history tried to bury, the ones they never wanted told out loud. It was August 1973. The war was over for him. Ray stepped off a rusted Greyhound bus in the same Georgia town he'd left 4 years earlier. Same cracked sidewalks, same courthouse clock stuck 10 minutes. Slow, same men on porches acting like they don't see you until you're close enough to nod. He had on his army greens, pressed, boots polished, a medal in his duffel. He didn't carry much else. A few letters from his mama, a photo of his, platoon for brothers who didn't make it back, and one pair of dog tags that used to belong to someone who bled out in his arms. Ray stepped onto that dusty pavement with his back straight, but there was no crowd, no handshake, no welcome home, just the hot breath of southern August and the way folks glanced and looked away. He walked past the barbershop window. They used to post every soldier's return on the glass with a little flag next to it. His picture wasn't there, but another one was. A white kid named Jimmy Harlan. Ray remembered him from boot camp. They shared the same bunk once. Same company too. Jimmy got a banner in the town square. Ray got silence. He didn't flinch, just pulled the strap of his duffel tighter and kept walking. He passed the diner, the one that still served whites-only coffee if you didn't ask too many questions. The same cracked menu, the same smirk behind the counter. A teenage boy pushed through the door and spit a sunflower seed near Ray's boot. Didn't say a word, just stared like he'd seen a ghost. Ray turned his head slow, looked right at him, then kept walking. Same pace, steady. He passed houses with flags still hanging from the porch. Not American ones, not the stars he fought for, but red ones with a blue X and white stars, Confederate flags, bold and angry, as if they'd never surrendered. Every step home felt heavier than the last. His mama's house sat at the edge of town, near the tracks, paint peeling, shutters hanging loose, but the door still had the same brass knob, worn from decades of tired hands. He stood there for a second before knocking. She opened the door and looked at him like she was still trying to believe he was real. Then she said, "Raymond Carter, look at you. You came home standing." He stepped inside without saying much, just hugged her, long and tight. They sat down at the kitchen table, but the silence filled the room faster than words could. She poured sweet tea. He sipped it like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. "You get off that bus alone?" she finally asked. "Yeah." "Anybody meet you?" "No." She didn't ask anything else. She just stared out the window. Then, said real soft, "They welcomed Jimmy Harlan home with a parade last week." Ray nodded. "I saw." He didn't say how that felt. He didn't have to. The silence between them said it all. Later that night, he sat on the porch by himself. Crickets chirped in the weeds. A train whistle called out in the distance like it was mourning something. He lit a cigarette, watched the smoke curl into the air, and thought about the men who didn't make it home. About how maybe, just maybe, they were the lucky ones. Because coming home to a place that don't see you, that's a different kind of war. And Ray, he had medals in his bag, but not a single seat waiting for him at the table. The first thing Ray did after settling back home was lace up his boots and head to the mill. Same one his father had worked in for over 30 years. His dad used to come home with his hands blackened from soot, arms sore, but always with enough to keep food on the table and pride in his voice. That mill paid for Ray's textbooks, paid for the roof over his head. It was honest work. Ray stood in front of the foreman's office with his military papers tucked under one arm, wrote out every skill he had: rifleman, squad leader, engineering, corps, leadership commendation, not just some soldier they trained him to lead. He knocked. The foreman didn't even stand up when Ray stepped inside, just looked at him like he was already tired. "We're full up," he said flatly, without asking for his name. Ray started to hand him the form anyway, but the man waved it off. "Don't have anything right now." Ray nodded. "You hiring again soon?" The man looked at the calendar. "Might be months." Ray walked out without saying more. Just like always, steady. 3 days later, a kid named Luke, the same white boy Ray trained in Vietnam, started at that same mill. Bragged about it down at the gas station. Said the job was a breeze, nothing like the jungle. Ray just stood there in line, buying oil for his mama's stove, listening like it was some radio broadcast. Luke never even looked his way. He thought, maybe housing would be a better shot. Closer to town, something small. The house he had with his mama was fine, but the pipes were rusted and the roof leaked when it rained hard. Ray figured he could do better. He found a listing in the paper for a one-bedroom with a screen porch. Met the landlord in person, old, white man in overalls, big gut, and a spit cup he didn't bother hiding. Ray shook his hand and smiled. House still available. The man looked him up and down. You looking for somebody? No, just me. The man rubbed the back of his neck, then spat into the cup. Not your kind of neighborhood. Ray blinked. My kind. The man didn't answer, just turned and walked back inside his truck. That night, Ray didn't eat, just sat on the porch, staring at the dark, listening to the wind scrape the trees. His mama came out and sat next to him without a word. He finally spoke. Daddy got hired there when he was 17. Same mill, same skin. She didn't respond, just looked out toward the woods like she was watching for something that never came. Sunday came, and Ray figured church would feel like a place to breathe, somewhere familiar. He wore his only clean white shirt, slacks ironed, and shoes polished. Again, walked into the First Baptist Church of Jubilee like he had as a boy. The usher paused when he saw him, then gave a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He handed Ray a bulletin and nodded toward the back. Ray sat down, alone. Nobody greeted him. Nobody asked how long he'd been gone. Halfway through the service, a few of the older folks started whispering. The deacons nodded toward him like he didn't belong, and it hit him all at once. It wasn't just strangers. It wasn't just employers. It wasn't just landlords. It was everywhere. Every sidewalk, every room, every handshake that never came. It was stitched into the town like it was part of the soil. After service, just as he was walking out, he heard a soft voice behind him. You looked like you were somewhere else, she said. He turned. She was small, brown-skinned, maybe in her 30s, wore a navy dress and held a thin leather Bible. She smiled. I'm Ruth. Ray. He replied. You just get back? Yeah. Trying to stay back. They talked outside for 20 minutes that first day. Then the next Sunday, they met again. This time, she brought sweet tea in a mason jar. That night, they sat on her porch under a humming porch light while the crickets screamed around them. You came back to a country that never left the war, she said quietly. It just changed the rules. Ray didn't answer. He didn't have to. He just looked down at his hands. Hands that once pulled wounded men out of burning brush, now tired to hold anything steady. She reached over, took his hand, and held it in hers, soft, strong, sure, and for the first time since he stepped off that bus, Ray felt something real, but deep inside, a truth was settling in. This wasn't home. It was a battlefield without a flag, and the war wasn't over. It just stopped pretending. Ray ended up getting work through a favor from an old neighbor, a quiet black man, who swept floors in the county courthouse for nearly 2 decades without ever being noticed. He made a call, and by the next week, Ray had a mop, a uniform, and a badge that said janitorial staff. It wasn't what he wanted, but it was work, and in that town, that counted for something. He cleaned bathrooms used by men who wouldn't shake his hand, emptied trash for offices where decisions got made about lives like his, polished wood floors he'd never be invited to stand on and choose. That mattered. The first week, the supervisor, a stout man with a cigarette burn on every fingertip, pulled Ray aside. Just do your job, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Don't talk politics. Don't bring up the war. And don't go thinking this is anything more than what it is. Ray nodded. He did the job like he did everything, careful, sharp, quiet, kept his head down, mopped corners nobody noticed, cleaned toilets that smelled like whiskey and spit, worked nights mostly, fewer people around. But silence doesn't last forever, not when truth keeps walking behind you like a shadow you can't shake. One night, he was emptying the bins in the county commissioner's office. The door was cracked open. Inside, 3 white men laughed over bourbon. One of them, the same man who'd smiled at Ray that morning while handing him the trash, was red-faced, laughing hard. Best damn idea they ever had, he chuckled. Send all them boys off to die in the jungle. Hell, better than letting them breed at home. Another man chimed in, slurring, yeah, Send the troublemakers and the cholerids first. Then came that word, the one Ray had been hearing his whole life. He froze. His fingers clenched around the trash bin. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there in the hallway, breathing through his teeth. They didn't know he was there. Or maybe they did. Maybe they didn't care. Ray turned and walked away. Didn't slam the door. Didn't look back. But that night, he wrote it down, every word, every name. Every time someone looked through him like he wasn't there. Every lie dressed up as policy. Every false smile. He started a journal, not to make sense of it, just to make sure it didn't disappear. He kept it under his bed, in a wooden box wrapped in an old army t-shirt. Pages filled with quiet rage, ink soaked in grief. Ruth found him writing one night. She picked up the notebook and flipped through it. You keeping score. I'm keeping truth. She sat beside him, placed her hand on his. Ray, there. Never gonna read this. You could burn this whole town down with these pages and they'd still say it never happened. I'm not writing it for them. Then who? He looked at her, eyes tired, jaw clenched. For whoever comes next. Ruth sighed. You're not at war anymore. Ray shook his head. Yes, I am. This one just don't wear a uniform. She kissed him, soft and slow. Promise me you won't let it eat you alive. He didn't answer, just kept writing. Because in a place built on silence, every truth becomes a weapon. And Ray? He was running out of places to keep his weapons hidden. Ray had spent years mopping the floors of that courthouse like it was holy ground, watching decisions get made that never once had his name on them. Every insult, every closed door, every handshake that stopped halfway, he carried it all. Not in anger, not at first, but in silence. The kind of silence that weighs on a man's spine. But silence has a limit. And Ray reached his dot one night, with the windows open and the crickets singing outside. Ray sat at the kitchen table and pulled out a clean sheet of paper. His journal sat beside him, worn soft from use. He didn't copy it. He didn't rehearse. He just started writing. He wrote about being drafted, about the heat, the screams, the blood, about pulling pieces of a man into a poncho because no one else would. He wrote about coming home to a town that had erased him before he even stepped off the bus, about being invisible in church, denied work, denied housing, denied humanity. He wrote every word with his name at the bottom. Raymond Carter. No initials. No hiding. He mailed the letter to the town paper the next morning. Didn't ask Ruth. Didn't warn anyone. Just folded it up and sent it off like it was laundry. It was printed 2 days later. Front page, bottom half. Just enough space to show. They tried to ignore it, but not enough to bury it. The phone started ringing that afternoon. Some said he was making it up. Said it was ungrateful. Said it was dangerous talk. But some whispered thank you. Black folks stopped him on the street, nodded low, handed him folded notes like prayers. Even a few white folks, quiet ones, tired ones, looked him in the eye for the first time. It spread beyond the town. Somebody mailed copies to their cousin in Macon. A teacher read it aloud in class and got suspended. The letter was fire, and fire don't ask permission. That's when the sheriff showed up. It was late, just past 11. Ray was sitting on the porch, smoking, eyes steady. The sheriff pulled up in a county car with the lights off. Got out slow, like he was stretching. Walked over and leaned against the rail. Raymond, he said, tipping his hat. You writing now? Ray nodded. Didn't get up. The sheriff smiled. But it was the kind of smile that carries warning behind it. Folks are stirred up. Don't want no trouble in town. Papers like that got weight, especially when they carry your name. Ray looked at him. Then maybe they ought to read it slower. The sheriff's smile faded. Just watch your tone is all. Then he walked back to his car, just kicking behind his boots. The next morning, Ray was let go. Official reason. Restructuring. Unofficial reason. He stopped being quiet. Ruth cried when she heard. You got no job now. No insurance. No protection. I never had protection, Ray said. You think writing more's gonna fix it? He looked her dead in the eye. They want me quiet. I was quiet in Vietnam. I won't be quiet here. Ruth stood there, tears streaking down her cheeks, her voice shaking. I'm scared for you, Ray. I know, he whispered, but I ain't scared anymore. He opened the journal that night and kept writing. Every name, every date, every truth they hoped he'd bury, because once the fire starts burning, you can't tell it to stop. Time moved on, even when it didn't feel like it. Ray got older. His hair thinned, his hands stiffened, and his walks grew shorter. Ruth was still by his side, though slower now, and quieter too. They lived simple, didn't travel, didn't chase anything. But that journal, it never stopped, growing, filled a whole drawer by the time he hit 70. The town changed to on the outside. At least, new storefronts, a school wing with shiny glass windows, a mural painted near the courthouse showing unity and justice. But Ray had seen enough to know paint doesn't change wood. Not really. Then came an election. Young man, black, mid-30s. Name was Elijah Brooks. Born in that same town Ray came home to in silence. Grew up hearing whispers of the past. Heard stories from barbers and janitors, and old men on porches who long stopped trusting microphones. Elijah won, not by a landslide, but enough. One of his first moves, he asked for every letter, complaint, and report buried in the county's archives going back 50 years. And that's when he found it, Raymond Carter's letter, folded and yellowed. The ink faded, but still loud. Elijah read it 3 times, then had it reprinted and handed out at the next town meeting. Ray didn't know about it until that morning. He almost didn't go, said he had laundry. Ruth told him, go see what the world looks like when it finally turns its head your way. So he went, sat in the back, old coat on, hat in hand. Nobody noticed him at first. He liked it that way. Elijah stood at the front, tight crooked like nerves were showing through. Then he started reading. The room hushed. Words filled the space like thunder wrapped in memory. And when I came home, there was no welcome, no flag, no handshake, just silence and a job to mop the same floors where men laughed at sending me to die. Gasps, some nods. One woman closed her eyes like she just remembered something she'd tried to forget. Then Elijah said the name, Raymond Carter, and the room froze. People turned, looked around until their eyes landed on him. He didn't stand, didn't smile, just looked forward. That's when something strange happened. An older white man one Ray remembered from the courthouse days stood up and walked over, pulled out a chair, right up front, turned and looked at Ray. And for the first time in 70 years, someone invited him to the table. Ray got up slow, walked down that aisle without a cane, though it hurt. He sat in the chair, didn't speak, didn't need to, because sometimes just being seen is the loudest thing a man can do. The bells rang slow that morning. 1, 2, 3, a sound that once marked time now marks something else. Memory, loss, love that never rushed but never left. Ruth was gone, peacefully, they said, in her sleep. Soft as a prayer whispered through an open window, Ray walked to her grave alone. No umbrella, no ceremony, just him, a worn suit, and a single white lily. He knelt, laid the flower down, then sat on the bench beside her name carved in stone. The wind moved gentle through the trees, the air thick with August heat. They remember now, he said, voice rough but steady. Took him long enough. He sat there a while, didn't cry, just stared at the dirt like it was sacred ground, and to him, it was back in town. Things had changed more than he'd let himself admit. His journal, those pages he wrote by lamplight, through grief and fire and silence, had been copied, cataloged, and placed in the local library under veteran archives, front shelf. It had a plaque, Raymond Carter, Vietnam veteran, writer, witness. Students came to read it now, not just black kids, white, brown. Teachers used it, preachers quoted it, people whispered his words like gospel. Ray never asked for that. He just didn't want to be forgotten. Sometimes he'd sit in the back of that same library, watch the young ones flip through pages he once hid under his bed, watch them pause, frown, nod, see themselves in lines written long before they were born. And in those moments, he didn't feel tired, didn't feel small. He felt whole. The fight wasn't over. He knew that. But something had shifted. Not victory, not yet, but truth. And truth has a way of staying alive long after fists unclench. Ray stood from the bench, touched the top of Ruth's stone one last time. I kept my promise. He whispered. I didn't let it eat me. He turned, walked back down the hill, slow and steady, the same way he came home all those years ago. But this time, he wasn't carrying silence. He was carrying peace, and peace, that's the loudest thing there is.